Thank you, everybody, for joining this panel around the last mile. I'm going to introduce the three panelists in just a second. What we're going to be talking about is the last mile, and by that we mean the delivery of psychedelic therapies to patients. Everybody talks about drug discovery, everybody's fascinated by the compounds, but as my panelists will illustrate, without a doctor, therapist, intermediary, clinic, retreat, without the setting, the treatments will be nowhere near as effective as they could be. So this last mile is very important, doubly important, given that we're in an emerging sector and people are not familiar with the treatments. It's not like taking an aspirin or paracetamol. There is a real need for guidance and education. So we will start with Dr. Erica. Would you like to just give a brief introduction?
I'm Dr. Erica Zelfand. I'm a licensed primary care physician, and I specialize in integrative and natural approaches to mental health, which you pull on that string and it doesn't take too long before it actually leads you to psychedelic healing. So that has become an area of professional and personal focus and interest for me. And when I am in countries in which certain substances are legal, I actually work in that context with patients. And I also volunteer at festivals and special events doing psychedelic harm reduction services on site. And I also teach both the community and clinicians
Fantastic.
on how to trip responsibly and the medicine of it.
Thank you. Lynsey, bonsoir. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Can you hear me? I'm not sure if my mic.
Yes, very
okay,
clear.
Great. So I'm Lynsey Bourke. I live in Dakar, Senegal, where I work for a nonprofit called DKT International that works with pharmaceutical companies in order to get low-cost drugs into the global south. And we work primarily around abortion products. And in my free time, I like to work a lot with psychedelics.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Joelle, can we continue with you?
Absolutely, absolutely. My name is Joelle Briere. I'm the founder of Kaivalya Collective, which is a retreat company that deals with spiritual and transformative retreats, mainly working with entheogenic medicines. I'm a yogi and acharya, so a teacher of Vedantic and Vedic wisdom, and also what I call an experiential theologian.
Thank you very much. Ronan, you should need no introduction, old friend of mine, but please tell the audience what you do.
Sure. I'm executive chairman and one of the co-founders of Field Trip Psychedelics Inc. We're just on the verge, actually, of listing on the Canadian Securities Exchange. Our first trading day is next week, and we're really building the first integrated company in psychedelic therapies, focusing both on the development of new psychedelic therapies as well as the delivery through our psychedelic clinical hubs, of which we have 3 open now in Toronto, New York, and LA. Chicago should be open sometime next month, and we'll have 2 more hopefully before the end of the year, scaling up to hopefully around 75 over the next 3 years. But I'm sure demand is going to far exceed what we could do even through 75 locations. But that's Field Trip in a nutshell.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So I'm going to kick off pretty generally and start by asking you to explain your experience of this last mile and this idea of the importance of the setting, the context, and the caregiver in psychedelic therapy. So, Dr. Erica, what has been your experience in terms of how important that is for patients?
I think the set and the setting piece cannot be overstated. However, that being said, it's also been somewhat remarkable for me to see the results of some of the studies, for example, the ones coming out of NYU and Hopkins, in which individuals describe their experience on psilocybin as among the most spiritually significant experiences of their lives. And as Matthew Johnson pointed out when I heard him present his data once, he said, that's in a hospital room in Baltimore. Right? So if you just think about how much more we can even leverage that in more beautiful setting, a more integrated setting. But I think even in a hospital room in Baltimore, what we have is a sense of safety. And I think that is one of the most important, or perhaps the most important pieces of preparing either to do a psychedelic journey oneself or to support somebody else through that process, is for them to feel safe. Because when individuals don't feel safe and their face starts melting and early childhood trauma becomes conscious, it travels from subconscious to conscious, or any of the other things that can happen, if an individual doesn't feel like they can be held safely in that experience, that's where we get, what we colloquially call bad trips. And a bad trip or a difficult psychedelic journey that doesn't feel safe can actually become a trauma for an individual, and can not only be a net negative for them, but can actually traumatize them and set them back in their healing process.
Thank you. And just, I'm going to switch to Joel. This idea of safety and comfort, and what are some of the ways that practitioners, clinics, doctors can generate that sense of safety and security during these experiences?
In the container, as far as safety and security goes, I say the container really begins at first contact. When that person or that initiate reaches out at that first point to speak to you about working with the medicine, that really begins the container, and receiving them where they're at is, I feel, one of the most important first steps. I actually got most of my training from this, from being in the hospitality industry for 20 years and receiving people wherever they're at, however they are. And though my background is in very deep Vedic science and very traditional spiritual lineages, I do not require that people come and meet me where I'm at or skip to a specific philosophical paradigm to be able to work with me or this medicine, but really meet people where they're at and meet them halfway and give them not just a gentle, warm, welcoming invite and entering into the container, but also making them know that they are accepted exactly how they are. Just with yoga, a lot of people say, oh, I could never do yoga, I'm not flexible. It's like saying I could never take a bath, I'm too dirty. So when people think they have to get in the right mind state to work with these medicines, we welcome the challenging experience. We welcome the quote unquote bad trip, as we have the capacity and we have the container to hold space for that and allow whatever aversions are triggered, allow whatever's coming up to be processed, and have that support of the group. And we've been doing all this work with creating a nourishing container with the group at least a week before the retreat, on Zoom calls and stuff. But and then all these different tools at the disposal. Not only do we work with the yogic system, but other different Western integrative techniques and different therapies. And I think this container, or not this container in particular, allowing people to feel heard, allowing people to feel safe in who they are is very important, in that not feeling that they have to make a leap to some spiritual mindset as they perceive what a spiritual mindset may be, but really allowing them to be as dirty and messy as they need, and know that they're loved and accepted in that space, and that this container is all about bringing all that up, bringing all the shadows up, and as long as people feel okay about that. So I feel really just making people feel comfortable in themselves and know that they are accepted with their flaws and with their perfections would be our first approach.
Thank you. I'm going to switch to Ronan just quickly, because when you go public, you will be under tremendous scrutiny. And I guess if anybody is doing this patient-facing work under pressure, it will be Field Trip. How, as a company and at a corporate kind of level, how do you ensure stuff is safe, de-risked, and that patients are comfortable and not going to cause a problem either to themselves or to you? What are some of the, the practical aspects of putting off this last mile?
Sure. I mean, in many ways, it's exactly what Joel talked about, but we'd probably couch it in a much more clinical language. But we do a lot of work. We screen patients, everywhere along the line, but also handhold them through the process. So anybody who gets in touch with us, either directly or through a physician referral, we have our psychiatrist review their file before we consider working with them. We ensure that they're medically and physically fit In our clinics, I should clarify, we're using ketamine-assisted psychotherapy, which is legal and prescribable in North America, which is where our clinics operate. But our psychiatrists will do a screening to make sure that emotionally and mentally ketamine-assisted psychotherapy is appropriate. Our doctors will do a physical screen to make sure that there's no medical risks associated with it. Generally, ketamine is extremely safe in most situations, but there are certain instances where ketamine is not an appropriate treatment option. Assuming everything goes smoothly, then again, hand-holding people along the way so they understand the process altogether. Then eventually we'll start the treatment. They'll meet with their therapist. They'll have a pre-session. They'll come in for a ketamine session, which is immediately followed by what we call exploratory therapy session, which is a very light touch, really an opportunity for people to document their experience, communicate it to a therapist. That happens, we have 2 ketamine sessions with exploratory therapy, then followed by an integration test therapy. That's currently our protocol, which is trying to blend, the best evidence around ketamine therapy with what we know about psychedelic therapies as well. We're also actively working with digital tools. We recently launched, although it's not publicly available, Portal, which is our digital tool to support patients in our clinics, so they can do the work and be prepared in advance through meditations, reading information, asynchronous chat with their therapist. So we're really trying to blend modern medicine, modern Western approaches to medicine and mental health, but not excluding all of the great wisdom and knowledge that has come through either the cultural traditions or even the last sort of 60 years of the people who have maintained the light of psychedelic therapies, notwithstanding the political and legal considerations. And so that's how we're doing it. We're really trying to be medically first, ethically first, but really also leaning into a lot of the psychedelic aspects of the experience.
Thank you. So that's about a very rigorous onboarding process, effectively. So it's a kind of an on-ramp for the psychedelic highway. Probably the wrong metaphor, I don't know. So Lynsey, I want to ask you a linguistic question. You work in Senegal. I've actually been to Senegal, crazy place, lovely pink lake. Given your kind of bilingual view of psychedelics and experiences, how important is language? And do you feel that because the majority of companies, literature, everything is in English, is there a need for translated materials? Do you think people going through therapy or experiences, particularly from kind of minority backgrounds or, with languages that are not common, is there a need for the sort of material and translation in order to get these therapies available globally?
Well, ironically, I work a lot with the Iboga communities here in Africa, and I've spent a lot of time in Gabon. And so actually, I think there's more of a need for Westerners to be able to speak French, because most of the materials around about Iboga are actually written traditionally by Gabonese in French language. And so they're not actually accessible to Westerners. And even people that are really interested in the Iboga movement don't know about these books that really kind of detail the history of Bwiti in in-depth ways that I actually haven't seen printed in any of the Western literature that's out there. And there's a lot of conversations going on in the Iboga world right now about set and setting. And it's pretty sacrilegious what's happening in Iboga detox clinics in the US, and also was formerly quite foreign to the Gabonese culture, as Iboga has always been used in the traditional sense and to awaken spiritual awakenings.